So we now call upon Olga del Pilar Vasquez, a social worker, a doctor of social sciences, an associate professor of social work, coordinator of the postgraduate social work, and master of social work at the National University of Colombia. She is now the team coordinator of the National University of Colombia, executing the project of integration approaches of action without damage and transitional justice in the process of land restitution. Well, thank you very much, Aura, uh, Judge Benjamin, the attendees at this event that remain until the last moment with us. Thank you so much for having accepted this invitation to our national and international panelists. The ideas that I share, they don't try to not intended to be exhaustive, an exhaustive memory of what we have tried to cover in these 2 days, and their conclusions. It would be somehow impossible to collect as much wealth achieved in these 2 days, and I think everyone in with their notes and in their reflection exercises and the proposals and the questions raised here, as they will we will have even better conclusions than I can give. What I'm trying to present here is part of a reflection that we have been doing for the past 5 years, accompanying the unit of land restitution, arriving from the action team without damage from the National University, which also emerges from the talks with the team of justice, our co-driver in this process, the concerns of students who have made their academic practices in the land restitution unit, and of course some personal reflections that I managed to do at this time. Um, I was aspiring. Let's see if I succeeded to take stock of 5 years, but also thinking of here and the next 5 years are the itinerary, the time frame at least we have so far established for this restitution law and reparations to victims. And on the other hand, it is impossible not to approach regarding the action without damage. That is what made us come to a company and to think of ourselves the land restitution. So also in honor of time, and we can then give generously to the question space. I will read what I wrote. Over the 5 years of law enforcement of the law 1448 of 2011, uh, we accompanied the land restitution unit with the aim of linking reflection on the impacts of interventions in context uh, focused focused upon. Uh, this reflection is internationally known as Do No Harm, and in Colombia and Latin America as Action Without Damage. Action Without Damage summary, it draws attention to the impacts of programs and projects, regardless of their good intentions, as can exacerbate conflicts, generating units, annular capacities of people, among others. These situations are known as damage of the intervention. However, the actions also have the potential to promote peaceful resolution of conflict and tensions, generate independence and self-management, and whether enhance local capacities for peace. Interventions that promote this corresponding shares without damage. The approach has several starting points. Number one, careful reading of the contexts. Number two, finding that the intervention is part of the context and therefore has the potential to cause damage or to contribute to building peace. And number three, the reference to actions and ethics of actions. It is clear that this latest edition has been made in Colombia and has given identity to approach action without damage proposed in our country. So let's look at each of these elements in the double registration. I would propose in 5 years that have passed, the five to come for the restitution and the development and implementation of the peace agreement. A careful reading of contexts. Readings of an inadequate biased or static context, limited by the parameters traditionally used as diagnostics of problems in logical cause and effect, omit the complexity and structural independence factors, relational, everyday factors in the problems of a territory. They have a high probability of generating after years of interventions. I'm sorry, generating damage years after the interventions. It is necessary when we start working on a territory to get closer to these complex relationships, but to also give a place to understand the socio-cultural characteristics of the population, to link the history of some phenomena that are expressed today but have reference in the past, and assess and enhance existing capabilities in subjects of elderly men and young women, etc., and social groups as starting points needed to initiate and develop whatever work in the local area. Interconnected and context sensitive detailed readings are characterized by being flexible, historical, upgradable according to the dynamism, the broad context, and in terms of assessing tensions and problems, but also potential or connections between situations and actors. Restitution is not only a process of individual cases with whom the facts refer to time and place that in the past led to looting and abandonment, the abandonment of property. Restitution is an intervention which affects, alters, modifies territories configured today from various dynamics. In this regard, the action of restitution should have one foot in the present and one in the past. With regard to the level of reading context, by accompanying the processes, we can see that the unity of land has made significant progress in reading the historical conditions of dispossession and neglect in the regions of action. That collates and complements the information obtained from the claimants with community sources, collective interviews, social mapping, and interviews with officials and stakeholders. Uh, I'm performing a situational analysis that reflects today's economic, social, and political conditions, projecting potential impacts and risk of restitution. Additionally, there are noteworthy efforts on the restitution of ethnic rights, characterizations of affectations of environmental, cultural, material, and symbolic factors generated not only by the actors and dynamics of the armed conflict, but by actions of development in the territories of indigenous and Afro-Colombian regions, territories. These various readings in timing and scale are an important starting point for doing a non-harm as a result of the action of restitution, and therefore we value very much so their existence. However, the level of development and rigorous implementation of each instrument, the ability to cross and interdisciplinary the information derived from each, and using this information to devise intervention strategies in the territory, updating these contexts according to the dynamics and changes that occur in regions, not always achieved, and accompanying it as we have been, raises questions and concerns that have not always been able to be solved. The challenge for the 5 years ahead in terms of reading context for the restitution is more complex. Mapping new circumstances that will be generated during the advent of peace and demobilization, the establishment of the assembly areas, the reorganization of the legal structures, and of course the arrival of new resources and national and international interventions for the implementation of peace. The mapping, which is done from this, and the reflection on how these conditions affect the restitution, shall be part or must be part of the necessary analysis to be carried out by the unit of land. Okay, secondly, the finding that the intervention is part of the context and therefore it has the potential to cause damage or elements towards building peace. During the restitution process, diverse impacts have been identified from the action. Women and men who, after have thought about returning when the restitution is crystallized, prefer to relocate or stay in the cities. People, apart for various reasons, today must be found reunited to receive a property. Families about to fragment because their younger members do not wish to return to the countryside, while older people yearn from their time that they left threatened communities that today watch their neighbours leave with whom they manage to consolidate relations of solidarity to be able to return. those who left 10 or more years ago, families who came to sidewalks now don't know why they inhabit or other people or why what is grown is no longer produced or why the river, the mountains or the valley are not the same. Restituted seekers waiting after 2 years or more to reach home. The production project, the roads, the schools that are required to restart life, land claimants, today once again threatened by powerful actors or illegal groups, mega projects eventually smothering returnees because they monopolize the roads, markets, employment. In these situations, we see defenseless institutions that do not know how to accompany and what to do about the conflict and resulting impacts of the process. No one was prepared for this. The impulse was the desire to implement a measure that marked a before and after in a country such as ours that had evaded the responsibility to take action to roll back the evictions and land abandonment. And 5 years later, we cannot keep saying we were not prepared and do not know what to do. If this is so, I invite you to think along with the judges, magistrates, and officials of the land unit the alternatives to propose and what to do. In these 5 years of support and thanks to the meeting with the justice, we understand that transitional justice is imperfect. Imperfection, which is reflected in understanding that a single mechanism, in this case the restitution, does not generate all the necessary changes. Imperfection that is reflected to be aware that it is not possible to achieve 100% of the results of reconciliation, equality, truth, reparation, and justice to which we aspire. Imperfection is thus reflected in a formula that does not exist for Colombia, that an expert group controlling all variables can be introduced to address these situations. We have to create mechanisms. We must set alternatives. We must develop connections, like South Africa did, how they did in Guatemala, in Turkey, Bosnia before us. We aspire to the best of some of them, but we must sacrifice some of the others. That is not easy. It's not easy to tell a woman who has seen the death of her husband and children that transitional justice recognizes what happened and offers land and a monument, or that the recognition of damage to the territory of an indigenous community are still in question because the policy of building roads, 4G, or mining license are still an unresolved stumbling block. But we cannot be pointing out the imperfections of the agreement, imperfections of peace, or imperfections of the institutional processes of restitution. We must do something, make windows that open because there are always options, and see in one point of seen in one point of Havana the opportunity of complementing actions that restitution cannot or didn't enter to work at the time, and now to be there written require the government and the guerrillas to honor their word. So we can and must continue to insist that a pact like that of Havana omitted something crucial for peace, and is the discussion of the development model, while still giving rise to the options that the first agreement weaving on topics such as farming, reserve zones, and other forms of protected rural economy. But we must continue to insist that the rights of indigenous and black communities are unconstitutionally supported and give no more weighting. If indeed restitution is a preferred mechanism for repairing and for peace, it must be surrounded, and who are here, we're the first ones called to do so. Okay, thirdly, the ethics of interventions, the notions of ethical, the ethical approach about to the action without damage. A unique reflection given in Colombia is of vital importance because it is about overcoming reductionism. Reductionism that appears when action without damage is seen as a technical instrument, which invoked produces the miracle to avoid negative impacts arising from the actions. The ethical perspective refers to two currents which must be articulated: deontological and consequentialist. Plus, we added a component of reflexivity to these two streams. The vision that operates in approach is designated as an indispensable framework for action before, during, and after interventions. It interrogates both institutions, makers of professional decisions, technical field teams, in the way they honor the principles that guide their action, and this corresponds to the current ethical. The approach also invites a critical and honest review about the interventions, and this refers to the reflexivity. And finally, the approach requires assessment of the consequences of the proceedings beyond the achievement of goals or efficiency of resources invested, and act when it finds the existence of damage of an intervention. And this is the consequentialist. This is the current consequentialist. In the case of restitution, the principles that guide the action laid down in the law of 1448 relate primarily to guarantee the rights of victims to truth, justice, and reparation. Then the law invokes the principles of dignity, of good faith, due process, subsidiarity, differential approach, complementary, progressiveness, and others. As a transitional public policy, land restitution seeks to create the conditions to reverse the plunder and neglect, contributing to reconciliation and peace. For its emphasis on transforming repair, which means that in addition to compensate the victims of dispossession and neglect, it must be articulated to measures that contribute to the elimination of discrimination and marginalization schemes that contributed to the victimization. Additionally, it should contribute to the memory of these events in the country, so that progress on the right to truth and achieving guarantees of non-repetition is made. This, however, is no easy task. Restitution unfolds in contexts where dynamics of conflict persist, uh, harassment and displacement, in regions where there is still territorial control by illegal actors and interests that have participated in the dispossession of land. They are still present and active, where the co-optation of institutions by local authorities are notorious facts, and where a constant leading threat and organizations defending human rights and land claimants. Okay, I missed something, so I'm sure you'll realize in my writings. Okay, so I'll just continue. The restitution process is also one of the most strategic and also the most observed and analyzed by the Academy and national and international organizations who have an eye on their progress, challenges, and opportunities. It has also been one of the policies that generated more opposition from political and economic sectors and have had their interests affected. During the 5 years of implementation of the restitution process, progress and achievements that are mainly related to the human and institutional capital have been built to achieve the implementation of the process at different stages, especially in the administrative and judicial areas. Uh, Highlighted also are the large number of judgments delivered to date, the new laws that are building the judges of restitution with failures, pro offered, and of course the growing number of families who today have managed with the restitution to recover their land rights. However, I also know that they question their meager progress on the calculations of the universe of denuded hectares or abandoned and victims of these crimes. The situations where there are secondary occupants refer to other victims or landless farmers who today must be evacuees to effect the physical handover of the premises. The attempt, which is maintained by various mechanisms to prevail mining or development projects on lands that are the subject of restitution. Data of non-registration showing a worrying paradoxical increase for the current progress of the politics, the limited access to the process for women, the difficulties in achieving the bonds between institutions on a national and territorial level, and the non-implementation of the measures imposed in the failure of judges and others. With its pros and cons, we firmly believe that the country must rise to support the restitution process. We have left alone the process to the sway of opponents and detractors who with petty arguments undermine its importance. It is important that a country like ours has recognized the massive dispossession. It will remain important for the truth about these crimes that continue to be investigated and that put the perpetrators on trial. It is also very important to continue returning in righteousness the land to the claimants. We've left restitution to fate when the mechanisms that are required to be real and sustainable failures have not been foreseen and continue to respond to the will or conviction of an agent or a manager or a contractor with commitment but who is disempowered, while the local and national state continue to act rigidly and not in the expeditious and flexible manner that a country in transition requires. Progress on the restitution and its contribution to peace will be compromised. Today, I dare say that the academy, the institutions, the corporations, social defenders, and organizations defending human rights, we must surround the process, continue walking alongside from critical positions, but also proactive and informed in order to generate a constructive debate. We must take on the tasks that only the competence of the unit and judges are not resolved. The restitution today finds bottlenecks in the post failure that cast doubt on the sustainability, the hope of the communities in their effectiveness, and you go on to derail this important mechanism. I hope that from this place where we are today and where each occupies as institutional representatives and academics, as grassroots organizations, let's take on this commitment as a way to get a restitution without damage or with the least possible damage and contribution to peace in our country. Thank you.